A stray ginger cat jumped into my car and asked me to take its kittens home. What happens when a seemingly ordinary stray cat deliberately chooses you? You might think it's a simple story of rescue, but prepare for the quiet twist hidden just beyond the back door, a discovery that reveals the cat's desperate secret and changes a lonely woman's life forever. Like, subscribe, and listen now to hear the full emotional journey of the uninvited passenger. The blast of the car horn ripped through the quiet hum of the highway, startling a crow off a nearby fence post. It wasn't her horn. Eleanor Vance gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles white against the worn leather. Beside her, utterly unfazed, sat the cat. It hadn't moved a muscle since leaping into her car 10 minutes ago at that derelict gas station. Its ginger fur, patchy and dull in the midday sun slanting through the passenger window, seemed almost too bright against the faded gray upholstery. It wasn't meowing, wasn't purring, wasn't rubbing against anything. It just sat, rigid, staring straight ahead through the windshield as if it had navigated this route 100 times. Eleanor risked a glance. The cat's eyes, the color of murky amber, were fixed on the road. There was an unnerving stillness about it, a focused intensity that felt less like animal instinct and more like resolve. Where had it come from? Why her car? Why jump in with such unhesitating purpose? The gas station had been deserted, save for the buzzing flies around the overflowing trash bin and the whisper of wind through the cracked pump handles. No houses nearby, no farms, just miles of asphalt stretching towards the hazy horizon on one side and dusty, undeveloped land on the other. She hadn't seen it approach. One moment she was screwing the gas cap back on, the next the passenger door was open. She was sure she'd locked it, hadn't she? And the cat was inside, settling in like a seasoned co-pilot. It hadn't seemed scared or desperate, just deliberate. Her heart was still hammering against her ribs. It was absurd. A stray cat, bold as brass, hijacking her Ford Taurus. She should have shooed it out immediately. Anyone else would have. But she'd hesitated, caught off guard by the sheer audacity, by the strange, quiet intensity in its gaze. And in that moment of hesitation, a different impulse took over, a weary resignation, perhaps, or a flicker of long dormant curiosity. She'd simply closed the door. Now, the silence in the car was thick, broken only by the engine's drone and the rhythmic thump-thump of tires over expansion joints. The cat hadn't shifted. Its breathing was shallow, almost imperceptible. It felt less like an animal sharing her space and more like a silent, furry judgment, or perhaps a plea she couldn't yet comprehend. A wave of unease washed over Eleanor. This wasn't just strange, it felt significant, freighted with an unknown weight. What had she just let into her car? What had she just let into her quiet, meticulously ordered life? The highway exit sign for her town, Oak Haven, loomed ahead, but suddenly, the familiar route felt like uncharted territory. Eleanor Vance had lived in Oak Haven for 35 years, the last 12 of them alone. Her house, a modest two-bedroom bungalow on Elm Street, was quiet. Too quiet some days. Since Arthur passed, the silence had settled in like dust, coating surfaces, muffling sounds, becoming a presence in itself. Her routine was the bulwark against it. Coffee at 6:30 a.m., tending the small vegetable patch out back, less out of passion, more out of habit. Weekly trips to the library, volunteering at the church thrift store on Thursdays. Today, a Tuesday, had been earmarked for a trip to the hardware store in the next town over for a specific shade of non-toxic paint. For the birdhouse Arthur had built years ago, a small project to fill the empty afternoon hours. Maybe a stop at the roadside farmer's market if the good tomatoes were in. It was the kind of unassuming day that made up the fabric of her life now. She was 58, a woman whose life had gradually shrunk, contracting around the absence left by her husband. Their only son, Michael, lived across the country in Oregon with his wife and 2 young children. They called every Sunday, bless them, but the miles felt vast, insurmountable. Her friends were mostly couples, their lives interwoven with shared histories she no longer fully belonged to. She wasn't unhappy, not exactly. Resigned was perhaps a better word. Resigned to the quiet, the predictability, the gentle slope towards old age. The drive to Millersburg had been uneventful. She found the paint robin's egg blue and decided against the farmer's market. The clouds were gathering, threatening a summer shower. The highway back towards Oak Haven was emptier than usual. She rarely needed gas on these short trips, but the needle was hovering near E, a nagging reminder of her oversight. That's when she saw the sign for the old starvin' Marvin's gas station, peeling paint and all. It stood alone, an outpost from another era, bypassed by the newer, shinier mega stations closer to the interchange. She remembered stopping there with Arthur once, years ago, when their car had overheated. It felt vaguely illicit, pulling into the cracked lot, the silence broken only by the crunch of gravel under her tires. She filled the tank, the smell of gasoline sharp in the humid air. As she went to pay inside the small, dusty kiosk, a single attendant, reading a worn paperback behind a smudged plexiglass shield, she didn't notice the cat. It wasn't until she returned to the car, mentally running through her short grocery list, that the day took its sharp, unexpected turn. Standing by the open pump, fumbling for her keys, she heard a faint scrabbling sound. She looked down. Nothing. Then, turning towards the car, she saw it. A flash of ginger fur disappearing through the open passenger door. Her first thought was annoyance, a stray tracking dirt onto her clean seats. Her second was confusion. How had the door opened? Had she forgotten to lock it again? Her hand went to the handle, ready to pull the door wider, to clap her hands and scare the intruder out. But then she saw it properly. Settled in the passenger seat, bolt upright, staring ahead. Skinny, fur patchy, but its posture was strangely dignified. It wasn't the cowering, fearful stance of a typical stray cornered. It was purposeful. Its amber eyes met hers briefly in the rearview mirror, not with fear, but with an almost unnerving sense of expectation. Time seemed to slow. The wind rustled the weeds growing through the asphalt. The distant hum of the highway felt miles away. In that stretched moment, Eleanor felt a peculiar kinship with the creature's stillness, its quiet insistence. Chasing it out felt wrong, like breaking a silent, fragile pact she hadn't realized she'd entered. Perhaps it was the loneliness. Perhaps it was the sheer unexpectedness of it. Perhaps it was just a flicker of defiance against the relentless predictability of her days. Whatever it was, instead of shooing, she took a breath, walked around the car, and slid into the driver's seat. She closed her own door, then reached over and firmly shut the passenger door, sealing the strange, silent creature inside with her. The click of the latch echoed in the quiet car. That was it. The decision made, the invisible line crossed. The quiet drive home suddenly felt charged with an unknown destination. The inciting incident wasn't the cat jumping in, it was Eleanor closing the door, accepting the interruption, and driving on. The 15-minute drive back to Oak Haven felt longer. Eleanor kept stealing glances at her passenger. The cat remained statue still, a furry sphinx occupying the seat Arthur used to fill. Its presence was intensely physical, the faint, dusty smell of neglected animal, the way the sunlight caught the rough texture of its coat, the almost imperceptible rise and fall of its thin flanks. It didn't fidget or explore. It simply was, a silent testament to its own mysterious agenda. Eleanor's mind raced. What was she doing? Bringing a stray animal into her meticulously clean house? What if it had fleas? Diseases? What if it scratched the furniture or sprayed? What would she feed it? She didn't even own a litter box. Decades had passed since Mittens, her childhood cat, had ruled their farmhouse porch. She was entirely unprepared. A sensible person would drive straight to the local animal shelter, drop it off, sign the forms, and return to the predictable quiet of Elm Street. But the image of the shelter, the echoing barks, the rows of cages, the desperate eyes made her stomach clench. This cat hadn't acted desperate. It had acted chosen. It had chosen her car, her presence. Abandoning it now felt like a betrayal, not just of the cat, but of that strange, impulsive moment back at the gas station. She pulled into her driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel under the tires now feeling alien. She switched off the engine. Silence descended, thick and expectant. For the first time, the cat moved. It turned its head slowly, fixing its amber eyes on her. There was no demand in the look, no pleading, just a steady, waiting gaze. "Okay," Eleanor whispered, the sound loud in the confined space. "Okay, let's see what this is about." She got out, opened the passenger door. The cat didn't bolt. It waited a beat, then hopped down gracefully, landing silently on the concrete drive. It looked up at her, then toward the back of the house, towards the wooden gate that led to the backyard. It took a few steps in that direction, then paused, looking back at her. The message was clear. Follow. Hesitantly, Eleanor followed. The cat padded silently ahead, its tail held low but not tucked in fear. It navigated the familiar flagstone path as if it knew every crack and mossy patch. Eleanor unlocked the back door, the one leading into the small mudroom off the kitchen. She held it open. The cat didn't rush in. It paused on the threshold, sniffed the air, then walked calmly inside, its paws making soft tapping sounds on the linoleum. Eleanor closed the door, feeling slightly breathless. The house felt different already, charged with this small, furry presence. She rummaged in the refrigerator, finding a can of tuna packed in water, thankfully. She opened it, draining the water into the sink, the fishy smell filling the air. She spooned a small amount onto a saucer she hadn't used in years, and placed it on the floor near the washing machine. The cat approached cautiously, sniffed the offering, then began to eat. Slowly, deliberately, not ravenously like a starving stray, but with a measured pace. Eleanor watched, fascinated. While it ate, she filled a small bowl with water and placed it nearby. The cat finished the tuna, lapped some water, then looked around the mudroom. Its gaze settled on a pile of old gardening towels folded on a low shelf. It leaped up silently, circled once, and curled into a tight ball on the faded blue terry cloth. Within moments it seemed to be asleep, its breathing deep and even. Eleanor stood there for a long time, watching the sleeping cat. The quiet of the house felt different now, not empty, but waiting. She felt a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. She had let something wild and unknown into her orderly world. The initial shock was fading, replaced by a growing sense of responsibility and a deeper, more unsettling question. Why? Why this cat? Why now? What did it want? She spent the afternoon trying to return to her routine. She puttered in the garden, pulling weeds with less focus than usual, her thoughts drifting back to the mudroom. She tried reading her library book on the porch swing, but the words blurred. Every creak of the house made her jump, expecting she didn't know what. A meow? A scratch at the door? But there was nothing, just the deep, rhythmic silence of the sleeping cat. As the afternoon light began to soften, turning the backyard golden, she found herself drawn back to the mudroom door. Peeking in, she saw the cat was awake. It was sitting up, washing its face with methodical licks. It finished, stretched languidly, a long, graceful movement that hinted at underlying strength, and then looked directly at her. It stood up, walked to the back door, and sat, looking pointedly at the handle, then back at Eleanor. The demand was unmistakable. It wanted out, but not just out into the yard. There was the same focused intensity in its gaze as there had been in the car, the same sense of purpose. Eleanor's heart gave a nervous flutter. This felt like the next step in a journey she hadn't planned. The initial obstacle, getting the cat safely home, was overcome. Now, a new complication arose. The cat clearly had unfinished business, and it seemed determined to make her a part of it. Her quiet afternoon was definitively over. The real reason for the cat's arrival was about to be revealed. Eleanor opened the back door. The ginger cat slipped out, not running, but moving with that same deliberate pace toward the overgrown back corner of the yard. It paused at the edge of the patchy lawn, where the neatly trimmed grass gave way to a tangle of wild clover, dandelions, and knee-high weeds bordering the woods that edged her property. It looked back at Eleanor, a clear summons. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor followed. Her sensible shoes crunched on dry leaves and twigs. The air was cooler now, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine needles from the woods. Where was it leading her? To show her a hunting spot? To simply disappear back into the wildness it came from? Part of her almost hoped for the latter. It would be simpler, wouldn't it? An odd afternoon anecdote, nothing more. But the cat didn't disappear. It navigated the rough terrain with surprising ease, its thin body weaving through stalks of Queen Anne's lace. It led her past the old, slightly listing compost bin Arthur had built, beyond the reach of her usual gardening maintenance, to a section of the property line marked by a low, sprawling white pine. Its branches dipped toward the ground, creating a shadowed, sheltered space beneath. The cat stopped at the base of the tree amidst a thick carpet of brown needles. It looked up at Eleanor one last time, a look that seemed to hold a profound trust, then lowered its head and disappeared under the lowest boughs. Eleanor hesitated. Crouching down felt foreign, undignified. Her knees creaked in protest, but curiosity, stronger now than apprehension, propelled her forward. She knelt carefully on the prickly bed of needles, peering into the dim space beneath the branches. At first, she saw nothing but shadows and tangled roots. Then, her eyes adjusted. The ginger cat was there, nestled in a shallow depression lined haphazardly with dry grass, leaves, and a few scraps of what looked like faded blue fabric, perhaps from an old discarded tarp or piece of clothing. It wasn't alone. Curled against the mother cat's belly, almost invisible against her fur, were three tiny forms. Kittens. So small, they looked impossibly fragile, like miniature versions of their mother, their fur still damp and slicked down. Their eyes were tightly shut, sealed against the world. One was ginger like the mother, another a patchy calico, and the third a dark tabby. A faint, high-pitched mewing sound reached Eleanor's ears, barely audible over the rustling leaves. The mother cat nudged them gently with her nose, licking each one in turn. Her earlier tension seemed to have vanished, replaced by an aura of focused maternal care. She looked utterly vulnerable, yet fiercely protective in that hidden space. Eleanor stared, frozen. Suddenly, everything clicked into place, the desperation masked by calm, the deliberate hijacking of her car, the trip home, the urgent need to get back outside. It hadn't been about the cat itself finding shelter. It had been about leading Eleanor to her babies. The desolate gas station, miles from anywhere, was no place to raise a litter. The cat hadn't just chosen a car. It had chosen a rescuer. A wave of emotion washed over Eleanor, awe, pity, and a sudden crushing weight of responsibility. This wasn't just a stray cat anymore. This was a mother, trusting a complete stranger with the lives of her newborns. Looking at those tiny, helpless creatures nestled in their makeshift den under the pine tree, Eleanor knew there was no turning back. The vague unease and curiosity of the afternoon solidified into undeniable purpose. Driving to the shelter was no longer an option. Leaving them here, exposed to the elements, potential predators, and the coming night, was unthinkable. Her quiet life, her predictable routine, it had just been irrevocably altered. The silent plea she'd sensed in the car now had a voice, tiny and mewing, hidden under a pine tree. She had been reactive until now, carried along by the cat's strange actions. But kneeling there, amidst the pine needles and the scent of new life, Eleanor made a conscious choice. She would help them. All of them? She shifted from being a passive observer of the cat's plan to an active participant, the provider they desperately needed. This hidden hollow, holding such fragile lives, was the turning point. Her mission was no longer just about a single cat. It was about protecting a family. Getting them inside, safe and warm, became her immediate, overriding goal. The quiet woman who had left for paint that morning was now unexpectedly a guardian. The sight of the vulnerable kittens spurred Eleanor into action. The quiet resignation that usually defined her movements was replaced by a focused energy she hadn't felt in years. She backed away slowly from the pine tree, careful not to disturb the new family, her mind already racing through logistics. Back in the house, she surveyed her domain with new eyes. Where could she put them? The mudroom was too drafty, too high traffic. The spare bedroom? It was full of Arthur's old files and hobby materials, dusty and unused. No, they needed warmth, security, and proximity. The laundry room, adjacent to the kitchen, seemed the best option. It was small, relatively quiet, and had a door she could keep closed. She found a sturdy cardboard box that had once held a new set of mixing bowls. It was large enough, but felt bare, impersonal. Rummaging in the linen closet, She unearthed an old baby blanket, soft flannel worn thin with age, Michael's, perhaps? She couldn't quite remember, but the faded pastel elephants seemed appropriate. She folded it carefully, lining the bottom and sides of the box, creating a soft, insulated nest. She placed a shallow dish of fresh water and a small plate with more tuna near where the box would go, anticipating the mother's needs. Now came the difficult part, convincing the mother cat to move her precious cargo. Eleanor knew better than to try handling the newborns herself. Her scent, her clumsy human hands, could cause the mother distress, even lead her to reject them. Trust had to be earned, step by careful step. She returned to the pine tree carrying the prepared box. She knelt down again, placing the box gently on the ground a few feet away from the hidden nest, its open side facing the mother and kittens. She spoke softly, her voice low and soothing. "It's okay, Mama. I brought you something better. It's warm inside, safe." The ginger cat watched her, amber eyes narrowed slightly, assessing. She nudged her kittens closer, a low growl rumbling in her chest. Not aggressive, but wary. Eleanor didn't move closer. She simply waited, kneeling patiently on the damp ground as the shadows lengthened. She talked quietly, murmuring about the warmth inside, the safety from the night cool, the readily available food and water. She wasn't sure if the cat understood the words, but hoped the calm tone conveyed her intentions. Minutes stretched into what felt like an hour. Eleanor's knees ached. Doubt began to creep in. What if the cat wouldn't trust her? What if it tried to move the kittens somewhere else, somewhere less safe? Had she misread the situation? Was she projecting human logic onto animal instinct? This quiet standoff felt like a crucial test. Then, the mother cat made her move. She stood up, stretched, and walked cautiously towards the cardboard box. She sniffed the flannel lining, peered inside, then looked back towards her nest under the pine. She seemed to be weighing her options. After a moment, she returned to the kittens. Gently, firmly, she grasped the scruff of the tiny ginger kitten's neck in her mouth. It went limp, instinct taking over. She carried it carefully over to the box and deposited it gently inside onto the soft blanket. Eleanor held her breath, watching, hardly daring to move. The mother cat immediately returned to the pine tree and retrieved the calico kitten, repeating the process. Then, the tabby. Each trip was made with the same focused determination she had shown earlier that day. Once all 3 kittens were safely nestled in the box, mewing faintly, the mother cat jumped in beside them, curling protectively around her brood. She looked up at Eleanor, a long, steady gaze. The wariness was still there, but underneath it, Eleanor thought she saw a flicker of acceptance. Carefully, slowly, Eleanor reached for the box. The mother tensed, but didn't hiss or try to escape. Eleanor lifted the box, supporting the bottom securely. It felt surprisingly heavy, freighted with the weight of 4 small lives and her own newfound responsibility. She stood up, her back protesting, and began the slow walk back towards the house. Inside, she placed the box in the designated corner of the laundry room. She topped off the water bowl and added a bit more tuna to the plate. Then, quietly, she backed out of the room and gently closed the door, leaving the small family in peace. The next few days were a blur of cautious care and low-level anxiety. Eleanor researched newborn kitten care online, learning about temperature regulation, feeding schedules, though the mother seemed to have that well in hand, and potential health issues. She made a quiet trip to the pet supply store, feeling strangely conspicuous as she purchased kitten formula just in case, a proper litter box, and high-quality cat food formulated for nursing mothers. She checked on them frequently, but tried not to hover. The mother cat remained watchful, but allowed Eleanor to change the bedding, refill food and water, and clean the small litter box Eleanor had placed nearby, which the mother thankfully started using almost immediately. The kittens seemed to be thriving, growing plumper each day, their mews becoming slightly more robust. Yet, a current of worry ran beneath Eleanor's actions. What if one got sick? Could she afford unexpected vet bills? Was she truly equipped for this? One evening, watching the mother cat diligently cleaning her babies, Eleanor felt a pang of overwhelming exhaustion. The quiet order of her life had been replaced by constant vigilance, the low hum of responsibility. Was this too much? Had her impulsive act of kindness been foolish? It was a fleeting moment, a dark night of the soul where the weight of her decision felt heaviest. But then, the tiny tabby kitten let out a particularly insistent squeak, and the mother nudged it gently, and the feeling passed. This was her path now. She had brought them in. She would see them through. She was preparing not just the laundry room, but her own life for the final integration, the climax where this fragile arrangement would either solidify into a new reality or collapse under the strain. The turning point came about 2 weeks after their arrival. The kitten's eyes had opened, revealing tiny slits of blurry blue, gazing unfocused at their small world within the cardboard box. They were starting to move more, tumbling over each other in clumsy attempts at play, their miniature legs still wobbly. Eleanor had established a quiet routine: gentle checks in the morning, midday and evening, fresh food and water, quiet murmurs of encouragement. One cool evening, Eleanor sat on the floor just outside the open laundry room door, reading her book. The house was quiet, except for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the faint, contented sounds coming from the kitten box, tiny suckling noises, soft purrs from the mother. The mother cat, whom Eleanor had started calling Ginger in her head, had become less wary. She no longer tensed every time Eleanor entered the room, though she still watched her closely when she handled the food bowls or bedding. Suddenly, Ginger stood up, stretched, and hopped silently out of the box. Instead of going to her food bowl or the litter box as usual, she walked directly towards Eleanor. Eleanor froze, book forgotten in her lap. Ginger stopped a foot away, looking up at her. Then, hesitantly, she rubbed her head against Eleanor's outstretched ankle. It was the first unsolicited sign of affection she had shown. Eleanor's breath caught. Slowly, carefully, she lowered her hand, palm open, towards the cat. Ginger sniffed her fingers, then leaned into the touch, letting out a low, rumbling purr that vibrated through Eleanor's hand. Encouraged, Eleanor stroked the cat's back, feeling the surprisingly soft fur beneath the slightly rougher outer coat. Ginger arched into the caress, her tail giving a slight twitch of pleasure. After a moment, Ginger pulled back slightly. She looked towards the box where her kittens were stirring, then back at Eleanor. Then she did something extraordinary. She gently picked up the smallest kitten, the ginger one, by the scruff of its neck, just as she had done under the pine tree. But this time, she didn't carry it to a safer spot. She walked the few steps back to Eleanor and carefully deposited the tiny mewing bundle directly into Eleanor's lap. Eleanor stared down at the minuscule creature nestled on her slacks, its unopened eyes and twitching nose the picture of vulnerability. Ginger sat beside her, looking from the kitten to Eleanor's face, then began to purr again, louder this time, leaning her warm body against Eleanor's leg. It felt like a profound gesture of trust, a final surrender. The mother cat wasn't just accepting Eleanor's help. She was actively including her in the circle of care, acknowledging her as part of the family unit. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, blurring the image of the tiny kitten. This was it. The moment the uncertainty dissolved, the moment the fragile arrangement cemented into something solid, something real. The question of whether this could work, whether she could truly care for them, whether they could bridge the gap between wary stray and trusted companion, was answered not with words, but with the warmth of a trusting cat and the weight of a tiny kitten in her lap. She carefully cradled the kitten, feeling its fragile warmth against her hand. Ginger watched, then closed her eyes, leaning more heavily against Eleanor, the deep rumble of her purr filling the quiet space. The climax wasn't a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet, profound acceptance. They were home. 3 years passed. The quiet house on Elm Street was quiet no longer, though the sounds were subtle, woven into the fabric of Eleanor's days. The frantic energy of the kitten's first weeks had mellowed into the comfortable rhythms of adult cat companionship. Ginger, no longer skinny and patchy, was a sleek, handsome matriarch, her amber eyes holding a calm wisdom. She still favored the windowsill in the kitchen, watching the birds at the feeder. But now her gaze often turned inward towards Eleanor, a slow blink conveying quiet contentment. The kittens, now fully grown cats, had developed distinct personalities. There was Rusty, the ginger male, bold and affectionate, who often followed Eleanor from room to room, demanding attention with a gentle headbutt. Patches, the calico female, was more reserved, preferring sunny spots on the back of the sofa, observing the household with dignified aloofness, though she'd condescend to curl up on Eleanor's lap during quiet evenings. And then there was Ash, the dark tabby, sleek and slightly mischievous, the designated hunter of dust bunnies under the furniture and the first to greet Eleanor at the door, tail held high. Eleanor's routine had shifted. Coffee was now brewed with 4 pairs of eyes watching her expectantly from various perches around the kitchen. Her gardening involved navigating around napping forms in sunbeams. The spare bedroom had been cleared out, not for guests, but for a multi-level cat tree and an assortment of feathered toys. Vet visits were now a regular part of her budget, accepted without the earlier anxiety. The silence Arthur left behind hadn't vanished entirely, but it was different now, punctuated by soft paws padding on hardwood floors, contented purrs, the occasional thud of a playful chase. Her son, Michael, had been surprised during a video call when Ash leaped onto the desk, demanding attention. "Since when do you have cats, Mom?" he'd asked, laughing. Explaining the story of the gas station cat felt like recounting a strange dream, yet the evidence was purring right there on her desk. Her grandchildren loved hearing the story and adored seeing the cats during calls, forging a new shared connection across the miles. Sometimes, neighbors would comment on how lucky Ginger and her kittens were to have found Eleanor. Such a kind heart, taking in all those strays, Mrs. Gable from next door would say. Eleanor would just smile. She knew the truth was more complex. Yes, she had provided shelter, food, and safety. She had rescued them from a precarious existence. But in return, they had rescued her from the quiet echo of her empty house. They had brought life, warmth, and gentle chaos back into her meticulously ordered world. They demanded nothing but care and offered uncomplicated companionship in return. Sitting on her porch swing on a cool autumn evening, Ginger curled on the cushion beside her, Rusty asleep at her feet, Eleanor watched the sunset paint the Oak Haven sky in hues of orange and purple. She thought back to that day at the desolate gas station, the strange, purposeful cat jumping into her car. People thought she had taken in a stray cat. But looking at Ginger, feeling the steady warmth beside her, Eleanor knew, deep down, that it was the cat who had initiated the rescue, bringing a quiet, lonely woman back into the fold of simple connection, back to the unassuming, essential warmth of caring for another living being. The uninvited passenger hadn't just found a home, she had made one. Everyone avoided the dirty, sickly stray cat until the mailman discovered it. What happened next surprised everyone. Why did everyone instinctively avoid the wretched stray cat huddled by the old rental house? It looked diseased, maybe dangerous. But the truth behind her sickness was far more shocking and revealed a danger threatening an unsuspecting family. Discover how one compassionate mailman, determined to help a creature everyone else rejected, uncovered a hidden toxic secret lurking just beneath the surface. Curious? Subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, and listen to the full gripping story now. The rasping sound tore through the quiet afternoon air, a wet, ragged cough that seemed too large for the creature emitting it. Sal, the mailman, paused mid-stride, his usual rhythmic gait interrupted. He spotted her then huddled beneath the overgrown azalea bushes bordering the old rental property on Elm Street. The cat, or what was left of her. She was a pitiful sight, even worse than usual today. Her patchy gray fur, Sal suspected it might have once been black or tortoiseshell, was matted with grime and something sticky. Bald, weeping patches of skin showed through, raw and inflamed. She was skeletal, each rib a distinct ridge beneath the mangy coat. But it was the breathing that stopped Sal cold. Each inhale was a desperate, shuddering effort, followed by that tearing cough that shook her entire frail body. She looked like she was drowning on dry land. He'd seen her around for months, this spectral feline haunting the edges of the neighborhood, always looking a little worse for wear. Like everyone else, Sal had kept his distance. She looked diseased, contagious maybe. Parents warned their kids away, homeowners shooed her off porches with brooms or sharp words. She was an eyesore, a nuisance, a problem everyone wished would just disappear. Sal usually just averted his eyes, dropped the mail in the nearby boxes, and moved on, a vague pang of pity quickly suppressed by the demands of his route. But today was different. The sheer extremity of her suffering, the awful sound of her fight for breath, pierced through his usual professional detachment. She wasn't moving, beyond the involuntary spasms of her coughing. Her eyes, usually wide with feral fear, were half closed, dull with exhaustion and pain. She looked like she was giving up. He took a hesitant step closer. The smell hit him then, a faint, unpleasant mix of infection, damp earth, and something vaguely chemical, metallic. It clung to the air around the bushes where she lay. He glanced at the rental house, peeling paint, overgrown lawn near the back, a general air of neglect despite the lights on inside. He couldn't just leave her like this. Not today. The thought of her dying alone, choking for breath under these bushes while he just walked away, felt suddenly unbearable. He wasn't a vet, wasn't equipped to handle a sick, potentially feral animal. But doing nothing? That no longer felt like an option. Standing there on the cracked sidewalk, the mailbag heavy on his shoulder, Sal felt a line being crossed within himself. He had to do something, but what? And how? The rasping cough echoed again, a desperate punctuation mark at the end of an impossible question. Sal Marino wasn't the interfering type. For 22 years, he'd walked the same route in this sprawling suburban neighborhood, a familiar, steady presence in his crisp blue uniform. He knew the rhythm of the streets, the names of the dogs, the times kids got off the school bus. He prided himself on efficiency, reliability, and a certain professional distance. He delivered the mail, exchanged pleasantries, noted vacation holds, and kept moving. He saw snippets of people's lives unfolded on their porches and lawns, but he made it a point not to get overly involved. He had his own quiet life, a small apartment, evenings spent watching baseball, weekends fishing when he could. The neighborhood itself was a typical American mix. Older, established homes mingled with newer developments, rental properties interspersed with owner-occupied houses. The rental on Elm Street, number 312, was one of the older ones, a two-story clapboard house that always seemed a bit run down, regardless of who the tenants were. The current occupants, Sal thought, were a young couple with a baby, but he rarely saw them outside. The property management company responsible was known for being slow with repairs. The stray cat, Sal didn't know its gender then, just saw its misery, had appeared sometime late last fall. At first, it looked merely unkempt, a bit thin, but as winter turns to spring, its condition deteriorates rapidly. The patchy fur, the skin sores, the limp, the wheezing cough. It became a truly wretched creature. The avoidance from residents intensified, whispers of mange, rabies, or just plain disgusting followed the cat's appearances. Sal heard snippets from porches. Animal control needs to deal with that thing. Keep Timmy away from it. It probably has worms. No one offered it food or shelter. Its presence was tolerated only as long as it remained unseen, a ghost flitting through the alleys and under cars. Sal, despite his usual reserve, had felt sorry for it. A few times, unable to bear the sight of it scavenging through overturned trash cans, he'd discreetly left the crusts of his sandwich or a small carton of milk near the edge of the woods bordering his route, far from judgmental eyes. But he hadn't done more. It wasn't his responsibility, he told himself. There were agencies for this sort of thing. But finding the cat collapsed, gasping beneath the azaleas at 312 Elm, that changed the equation. It wasn't just a nuisance anymore. It was an emergency unfolding right in front of him. Pity hardened into a sense of obligation. He couldn't rely on vague notions of animal control potentially showing up hours or days later. The cat needed help now. The immediate, visceral reality of the cat's suffering pushed Sal past his usual boundaries. He finished dropping the mail in the adjacent boxes, his mind racing. He couldn't just pick up a potentially diseased feral animal. He needed a plan. Returning to his mail truck, He grabbed the thick work gloves he kept for handling rough packages and an empty cardboard mail tub. He walked back to the bushes, his heart pounding unexpectedly. He spoke softly. "Easy now, girl, easy. Just want to help." The cat barely reacted, too weak to flee or fight. Carefully, slowly, Sal managed to slide the cardboard tub beside her and gently coax her into it, using a discarded piece of junk mail as a soft prod. She collapsed inside, a miserable heap. He covered the tub loosely with his folded rain jacket, ensuring air could circulate. His initial goal was simple, born of immediate necessity: get this suffering creature to someone who could potentially end its misery or, against all odds, help it. He decided the county animal shelter was the only realistic option. He'd drop her off after his shift, anonymously if need be. It wasn't much, but it was more than anyone else had done. Carrying the tub back to his truck felt like crossing an invisible line on his familiar route. The drive to the county animal shelter after his shift felt long. The cat, Sal had started thinking of her as female somehow, was terrifyingly quiet in the tub beside him, punctuated only by occasional, shallow, rattling breaths. Pulling into the shelter parking lot, Sal felt a knot of anxiety. What if they couldn't help? What if they took one look at her and decided euthanasia was the only option? He carried the tub into the noisy reception area. The overworked clerk behind the counter looked skeptical when Sal explained he'd found a stray in extremely poor condition. "We're really full, sir," she said tiredly, gesturing towards a chorus of barking dogs. "And our vet resources for strays, especially severe cases." She trailed off, the implication clear. "Look," Sal insisted, keeping his voice low but firm. "She's in bad shape, really bad. Found her collapsed, couldn't leave her. Can someone just look at her, please?" Reluctantly, the clerk buzzed for an animal care technician. A young man emerged, took the tub and peered inside. His eyes widened slightly. "Wow, yeah, she's rough. Let me take her back, see what Dr. Evans says. No guarantees, you understand?" Sal nodded, feeling helpless. He gave his name and number, just in case, though he didn't expect a call. He left the shelter feeling heavy, unsure if he'd done the right thing or just prolonged the inevitable. To his surprise, the shelter called him 2 days later. "Mr. Marino, this is Tina from County Animal Care, regarding the cat you brought in." Well, she's still with us. Barely. Dr. Evans managed to stabilize her, got some fluids and antibiotics in her, but what? Sal asked, his stomach tightening again. "Her condition is complex. Severe mange, yes, malnutrition, dehydration, but there's something else. Respiratory distress, skin lesions that look almost like burns, and she's not responding to standard treatment as quickly as we'd hope. Dr. Evans suspects possible toxic exposure, but we just don't have the funds for extensive testing on a stray like this without a sponsor or adopter lined up." Tina sighed. "Honestly, unless her condition improves significantly soon, or someone steps up to cover diagnostics, humane euthanasia might be the kindest route." Sal felt a surprising pang of dismay. He'd assumed the cat was riddled with common diseases, but toxic exposure? Burns? It sounded ominous. He thought back to where he found her, under the bushes at 312 Elm, the faint chemical smell. "Where did you say you found her again exactly?" Tina asked. Sal described the location, the specific bushes near the foundation of the rental house. He started paying more attention to 312 Elm on his route over the next few days. He deliberately lingered nearby, pretending to sort mail. He noticed the grass around the back corner of the house near those azaleas was indeed patchy and yellowish compared to the rest of the lawn. He sniffed the air. Sometimes there was nothing. Other times, especially after a damp morning, he caught that faint, unpleasant metallic or rotten egg tang again. He saw the young tenants occasionally. They looked tired, preoccupied. He tried asking the young woman once, when she came out to get the mail with her baby, if she'd noticed any odd smells around the property. She shrugged dismissively. "It's an old house. Always smells like something. Landlord's supposed to fix the gutters. Maybe it's mildew." She hurried back inside. Sal tried to lure the neighborhood squirrels and birds with peanuts away from that specific corner of the property, wondering if they showed ill effects. But they seemed fine, avoiding the immediate vicinity of the bushes naturally. His focus kept returning to the cat. Why that spot? Why hadn't she moved on when she got so sick? Was the source of her illness concentrated right there? He decided to try leaving a message for the property management company listed on the rental sign out front, mentioning a possible odor issue near the foundation at 312 Elm. He didn't mention the cat. He received no call back. His concern began to feel like an obsession, attracting mild irritation from others. Mrs. Henderson from across the street saw him peering at the bushes one day. "Sal, are you looking for that horrid cat again? Best leave it alone. Probably died, thank goodness. Don't go stirring up trouble." Even his supervisor at the post office noticed his slightly longer dwell times near Elm Street. "Everything okay on the route, Sal? Keep it moving." He felt foolish, second-guessing himself. Maybe it was just a sick cat finding a sheltered spot to hide. Maybe the smells were just typical old house issues. Then the shelter called again. "Mr. Marino," Tina again. "The cat, we've been calling her Cinder, by the way. She's rallied slightly, but the vet is quite concerned about these skin lesions. They really resemble chemical burns, and her lung scans show persistent inflammation. To proceed, we really need more diagnostics, maybe toxicology tests. It will cost several $100s. Without funding..." Tina didn't need to finish. Sal stood by his delivery truck, the phone pressed to his ear. He looked towards 312 Elm. Cinder, chemical burns, toxic exposure, the smell, the patchy grass. It couldn't all be a coincidence. He couldn't shake the feeling that the sick, rejected cat was trying to tell him something important. He made a decision. "Okay," he said, his voice firmer than he expected. "Okay, Tina, I'll sponsor the tests. Let's find out what's wrong with her." He didn't know how he'd afford it, but he knew he had to. The next few days were a blur of worry for Sal. He cut back on groceries, skipped his usual Friday night pizza, trying to mentally budget for Cinder's vet bills. He anxiously awaited news from the shelter, hoping the tests would provide answers, maybe even lead to a treatment that worked. At the same time, he felt a growing unease about the property at 312 Elm Street. He couldn't shake the connection his mind had made between the cat's specific, severe symptoms and that particular location. He tried talking to the young male tenant one afternoon when he saw him struggling with a recycling bin. Sal kept it casual. "Hey, hope you don't mind me asking, but have you guys ever noticed a funny smell around the back corner of the house, near those big bushes?" The young man, looking harried, shook his head. Nah, not really. Maybe damp earth? Why? Oh, no reason. Sal backtracked quickly, not wanting to cause alarm without proof. Just thought I smelled something odd the other day. The man grunted and went back inside. The call from Dr. Evans at the shelter came late Friday afternoon, just as Sal was finishing his route. Mr. Marino, Dr. Evans here. We got the preliminary toxicology results back for Cinder. Sal gripped the phone tighter. And they're concerning, the vet said gravely. We found traces of petroleum distillates in her blood work, specifically compounds commonly found in heating oil or diesel fuel. Consistent levels suggest ongoing exposure, not just a one-time contact. Combined with the respiratory inflammation and the dermal lesions that strongly indicate chemical burns, I'd say this cat has been living very close to a source of leaking fuel oil. Fuel oil? Sal's mind flashed to the back corner of 312 Elm. Older houses in this area often had underground heating oil tanks, some long abandoned or poorly maintained. A slow leak, seeping into the soil, concentrating fumes in a sheltered spot like the crawl space or under dense bushes. It fit perfectly. Cinder hadn't just been hiding there. She'd likely been drawn to the minimal warmth radiating from the house's foundation or the crawl space, inadvertently poisoning herself day after day. Doctor, Sal asked urgently, could that kind of leak, could it be dangerous for people? Absolutely, Dr. Evans confirmed. Prolonged inhalation of fuel oil fumes can cause serious respiratory problems, neurological issues, headaches, dizziness. Skin contact can cause burns like cinders. And if it's seeping into the ground, it's an environmental hazard, potentially contaminating groundwater. If there are people living right near the source, especially with a crawl space vent nearby, the implications hit Sal like a physical blow. This wasn't just about a sick cat anymore. The young couple, the baby living inside that house, they could be breathing in those fumes completely unaware. Cinder, the creature everyone shunned and avoided, was a living warning sign, a canary in a suburban coal mine. Her suffering was a direct result of a hidden danger that threatened human lives. Sal felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with cold fear. His role had fundamentally shifted. He was no longer just a concerned citizen who rescued an animal. He was potentially the only person who suspected a serious, immediate hazard. He thought about the dismissive tenant, the unresponsive property management, the neighbors who told him to leave the cat alone. No one else was going to connect these dots. It was up to him. His goal snapped into sharp focus. He had to confirm the leak and alert the tenants and authorities immediately. The risks, trespassing, confronting the landlord, being wrong, seemed insignificant compared to the potential consequences of inaction. He thanked Dr. Evans, promising to figure out the next steps for Cinder's care later. Right now, he had a more urgent delivery to make. A warning. The point of no return had been reached the moment he understood Cinder's illness wasn't random, but a symptom of a sickness potentially affecting the whole house. He drove away from his last mailbox, not towards home, but back towards Elm Street, his mind racing, formulating a plan. Sal knew he couldn't just knock on the door of 312 Elm and announce a suspected fuel leak based on a stray cat's toxicology report. The tenants might panic, the landlord could deny everything, and crucial time could be lost. He needed confirmation, something tangible. His first step was observation. Parking his truck down the street after his shift officially ended, he walked back towards the property, trying to look like he was just stretching his legs. He circled around to the back alley, getting a clearer view of the rear of the house. The damp patch near the foundation seemed larger after a brief rain shower earlier that day. He could definitely smell it now, that faint, oily, slightly sweet odor clinging to the humid air near the ground. He noted the location of the crawlspace vents, screened openings near the bottom of the foundation wall, one of them situated directly behind the azalea bushes where he'd found Cinder collapsed. Fumes concentrating there, drawn into the house. It seemed horrifyingly plausible. He decided to try the direct approach again, but carefully. He went to the front door and rang the bell. The young woman answered, the baby balanced on her hip, looking surprised to see the mailman back. "Sorry to bother you," Sal said politely, keeping his tone calm. "I was just wondering, have you or the little one had any unusual headaches lately? Or maybe felt dizzy sometimes?" She frowned. Maybe? We've both been feeling kind of run down. Thought it was just allergies or lack of sleep with the baby." She shifted the baby, who coughed, a dry little sound. "Why do you ask?" "Oh, just sometimes old houses can have ventilation issues," Sal said vaguely, his heart sinking at her words. "Might be worth checking your carbon monoxide detectors just in case." He didn't want to scare her without proof, but the mention of feeling run down and the baby's cough intensified his urgency. He called the property management company again, this time stating more firmly that he, as the mail carrier, had detected a persistent, fuel-like odor around the exterior of 312 Elm and was concerned about a potential leak. The receptionist sounded bored. "I'll make a note of it, sir. Someone will check it out. Eventually." Sal knew eventually wasn't good enough. He researched underground heating oil tanks online. Slow leaks were common in older installations, often going undetected for years, silently contaminating soil and air. He learned about the environmental regulations, the potential cleanup costs, the responsibility of the property owner. The landlord had every reason to ignore or deny the problem for as long as possible. Sal felt increasingly isolated. He considered calling the fire department or the utility company's emergency line, but what would he say? "I think there might be a leak because a stray cat got sick and I sometimes smell something funny." He needed something more concrete before triggering alarms that could turn out to be false, potentially causing trouble for himself and the tenants. The vet bills for Cinder were indeed mounting. Sal paid the first installment, feeling the pinch, but resolute. Cinder was stable, Dr. Evans reported, but her recovery was slow. Keeping her in the toxic environment would have been a death sentence. Getting her out was the only reason she was still alive. The thought strengthened Sal's resolve. He owed it to Cinder and to the unsuspecting family inside that house to see this through. He hit a wall. The landlord was unresponsive, the tenants unaware of the specific danger, and Sal lacked definitive proof. He felt the weight of responsibility crushing him. What if he was wrong? What if Cinder's illness was unrelated and the smell was just mildew or sewage? He imagined the ridicule, the trouble with his job if he made a false report. Doubt began to creep in, a chilling counterpoint to his conviction. Was he just a mailman playing detective, projecting his concern for a cat onto a situation he didn't fully understand? This felt like his dark night of the soul, burdened with suspicion but paralyzed by uncertainty and lack of proof. He spent a restless weekend, Cinder's haggard, trusting face superimposed on the image of the baby inside 312 Elm. He couldn't let it go. He needed proof. He remembered his online research mentioning handheld fuel vapor detectors, sometimes used by home inspectors. It was a long shot, but maybe? On Monday morning, Sal visited a local tool rental shop. They didn't have fuel vapor detectors, but the clerk, listening to Sal's vague explanation about checking an old shed, suggested a sensitive electronic natural gas leak detector. Sometimes pick up other volatile organic compounds too, like oil fumes if the concentration is high enough, the clerk offered. It cost $40 to rent for the day. Sal took it, the weight of the device feeling both hopeful and terrifying. His plan was risky, bordering on illegal. He would have to get close enough to the crawl space vent at 312 Elm after his shift, when it was getting dark, to use the detector. He'd need to trespass onto the edge of the property. If the landlord or tenant saw him, it could mean serious trouble. But it was the only way he could think of to get immediate, undeniable proof without involving authorities prematurely. He tucked the detector into his bag, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Tonight, he will find out the truth. Dusk settled over Elm Street, painting the houses in hues of orange and purple. Sal parked his personal car 2 blocks away and walked towards number 312, the rented gas detector heavy in his canvas tote bag. Lights glowed warmly inside the house, illuminating the young family's evening routine. Sal's stomach twisted with nerves. He slipped into the shadows along the side of the property, moving quietly toward the back corner, his ears straining for any sound. He reached the overgrown azalea bushes, the air thick with the now familiar cloying, oily scent. He knelt, fumbling slightly as he switched on the detector, holding his breath. He extended the sensor wand towards the crawl space vent hidden behind the leaves. The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. The detector shrieked, a high-pitched, insistent alarm that cut through the evening quiet. The digital display flashed red, showing levels far exceeding safe limits. Sal yanked the wand back, his heart hammering against his ribs. It wasn't just a faint smell, it was a concentrated, dangerous level of fumes pouring directly from beneath the house. Suddenly, the back porch light flicked on. The young man, the tenant, peered out into the darkness. "Hello? Who's out there?" he called, his voice edged with suspicion. Sal froze, caught. He had the proof, but he was trespassing. Before he could decide whether to run or explain, the decision was made for him. The intensity of the detector's alarm, designed to be piercingly loud, had clearly carried. From down the street, Sal heard the distinct sound of approaching sirens. Someone, perhaps a neighbor, startled by the detector's shriek, must have called 911, reporting a possible gas leak emergency. Within minutes, the street was bathed in flashing red and blue lights. Fire trucks and a utility company emergency vehicle pulled up. Firefighters, equipped with their own detectors, approached the house cautiously. Sal quickly explained to the first firefighter what he'd found, showing his rented detector still registering alarming levels near the vent. The emergency crews worked quickly and efficiently. They confirmed extremely high readings of volatile organic compounds, consistent with a significant fuel oil leak. concentrated near the crawl space. The tenants were immediately evacuated, the young couple looking pale and shocked, clutching their baby as firefighters explained the danger they'd been unknowingly living with. The utility crew located the source, a corroded seam in the old underground heating oil tank, situated just feet from the foundation, leaking steadily into the surrounding soil and allowing fumes to permeate the crawl space and potentially seep into the house. The immediate area was cordoned off. The hidden danger was finally out in the open. The following days saw a flurry of activity on Elm Street. Environmental cleanup crews arrived, mandated by the state EPA. The leaking tank had to be professionally drained and removed, contaminated soil excavated, a costly and complex process that fell squarely on the negligent landlord, who now faced hefty fines and potential lawsuits. The young family, temporarily housed elsewhere, expressed their stunned gratitude to Sal when he checked on them, realizing the mailman's strange concern had likely saved them from chronic illness or worse. The story rippled through the neighborhood. Everyone was shocked by the hidden danger lurking beneath the ordinary-looking rental house. But they were perhaps even more surprised by the catalyst, the sickly, avoided stray cat whose illness was the first clue. People looked at Sal differently now, not just as the quiet mailman, but as someone who had listened to his conscience, acted with quiet courage, and prevented a potential tragedy. The avoidance and judgment previously directed at the cat shifted towards the negligent landlord and a collective sense of unease about what other unseen problems might exist. And Cinder? With the source of her poisoning identified, Dr. Evans could finally tailor her treatment more effectively. The petroleum compound slowly cleared from her system. Her breathing eased, the terrible cough subsided, her skin, though scarred, began to heal, and hints of soft, dark fur started to reappear. She remained wary, marked by her ordeal, but the constant fear in her eyes began to recede, replaced occasionally by a flicker of curiosity. The shelter waived most of the fees, citing the unusual circumstances and Sal's role in uncovering the hazard. Sal visited her regularly. He couldn't offer her a permanent home himself. His small apartment wasn't ideal, and his job kept him away for long hours. But he couldn't abandon her now. He worked with Tina and Dr. Evans, sharing Cinder's story with rescue groups. Eventually, a small specialized sanctuary experienced with rehabilitating animals from neglect and toxic exposure situations agreed to take her in. They understood she would need long-term care and patience. Sal drove Cinder to the sanctuary himself on a sunny Saturday morning. It was a quiet place in the countryside with safe, clean enclosures and gentle handlers. As he prepared to leave, he knelt by her carrier. Cinder looked at him, not with terror, but with a calm, steady gaze he hadn't seen before. Hesitantly, she extended a paw through the mesh, briefly touching his hand. Sal felt a lump form in his throat. He hadn't just delivered mail, he'd delivered a warning, delivered a life from the brink. Driving home, Sal felt a quiet satisfaction. He hadn't sought recognition, only answers. In showing compassion to the most neglected creature on his route, the one everyone else avoided, he had inadvertently protected his community and uncovered a vital truth. It was a profound reminder. Sometimes the things we are most tempted to look away from hold the most important messages, and listening to the smallest voice or the most wretched cough can make all the difference in the world. His quiet life felt a little less quiet now, filled with the resonance of an unexpected connection and the enduring value of simply paying attention.